What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. You guys, my book is out. It is out in the world. I cannot believe it. I have been writing it for several years and it's just mind-blowing. Birth Story, Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal is a one-of-a-kind discovery into your pregnancy that provides you education through storytelling. So what's it really about? In the 16 years that I have served women with every personality type, I noticed there was a huge disconnect between what my clients were craving for childbirth education in a book and the books that were actually available on the market. There seemed to be unlimited resources if you are looking for an unmedicated birth or a natural birth or a home birth. But there just weren't a lot of resources for my clients who were part of the 92% of women birthing in a hospital and very much open to medical interventions like an epidural, nitrous oxide, and opioid medications. So I wrote that book to fill the gap for you. Week by week throughout your pregnancy, you will engage with material meant to educate and empower you as you plan for your own birth story. Hospital, medicated, unmedicated, or something in between. You are welcomed each week with a postcard from the womb, which is an adorable note from your baby about their miraculous development, as well as the amazing changes occurring within you. Then you are invited to use an uplifting birth affirmation and to respond to an introspective journaling prompt to document your feelings, curiosities, and wonders every single week. With room to memorialize your own birth story, this book will become a memory keeper and a legacy gift for your baby. You are encouraged to read one of my favorite birth stories each week, filled with childbirth education, tidbits, and explanations of important medical terms and procedures. These are real-life accounts shared with permission from the births that I've attended during my career as a doula. And I gave you a great mix. In the 42-week guide to your pregnancy and 42 birth stories, 7 of them end in cesarean section. About half are unmedicated and the other half are medicated deliveries. This is a judgment-free book. So take what you need from each element and leave the rest. Okay, are you ready to buy? I would love for you to go to birthstory.com and buy it directly from me. But I totally get it if you're an Amazon girl. You can head to amazon.com and just type in Birth Story Pregnancy, and the book should pop up. I'll deliver it straight to your doorstep. And I would venture to say that you might be an audiobook kind of woman because you're listening to a podcast. So if you would prefer to listen to this book, then I have recorded it and it is available for download at audible.com or on your Audible app. Thank you for being part of the Birth Story community. I am so excited for you to have this book in your hand once you've purchased it and it has arrived. I hope that you will give me your thoughts and feedback, and don't forget to take a selfie with your book and post it on Instagram and tag at Birth Story Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Birth Story Podcast. Today, I am interviewing Sarah Clark. And Sarah came to me via email from Canada. And I could not have been more excited, Sarah, to have gotten an email from your assistant about your story and what you do. So Sarah's really cool. She's like a podcaster and author, and she's got a really neat story. And so we're just going to start right there, Sarah. I want you to tell everybody that doesn't know you, maybe hasn't listened to your podcast or read your book, like who you are and why you are on the podcast today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, so I'm a fertility coach, a author, an infertility conqueror, a wife, a mother, a business owner. There's all the titles, but just a person living their passion, I guess, right now. As you know, I spent years in corporate and then discovered all the work I'm doing now and finally found my purpose.
I love it. Some of my favorite interviews are when I am interviewing just mom bosses that say just what you said, that they're living out their passions. Like once upon a time, they were in corporate America.
Yeah.
So you are my favorite kind of guest. And today we are tackling fertility. We're going to hear about your story, Sarah, and then we are going to talk about in detail how and why you just said, I am a fertility conqueror. Because there are so many women listening right now that need this hope, that need this message from you, that feel really lost, that feel sad, that don't know where to turn, and that maybe today's episode like opens a door of something that they haven't thought about before. So let's start at the very beginning. We know where you're at today, right? You're an author and a podcaster and a fertility conqueror. But once upon a time, Sarah was in corporate America in her 20s and looking to have a family. So will you walk us through that period of time for you?
Yeah, so corporate Canada. Yeah, and it was really, so I always joked in my early 20s that I was having menopausal hot flashes. I remember I was in HR at the time, and I'm like interviewing people and like joking, haha, menopausal hot flash. And turns out that's what it was. So I had irregular periods in my early 20s. And by regular, I mean like a couple times a year. I thought that was a good thing because I didn't get my period, didn't have to worry about it. And then in my teens, I had great skin. And then in my early 20s, I started getting acne. And I also had yeast infections. And then I had this weird fungal rash on my chest. So all these kind of seemingly unrelated symptoms. And so first line of defense when you have regular periods and acne is to go to your doctor and you're put on the birth control pill. So I was put on the birth control pill and the acne didn't really improve, but obviously the periods became regular, but that was not natural way of looking at it, more of a Band-Aid approach. So had this life plan of getting married at 25, got married at 25, and then wanted to have my kids at 28. So just before 28, decided to go off the pill. And at that time, the periods were still irregular. So I went to see my OBGYN. And then I was told that I had premature ovarian failure, which is the loss of function of your ovaries before the age of 40. And the only way I'd ever have children is by using donor eggs. And I remember her being in her office and she reaching up onto her shelf and grabbing the brochure for IVF and told me that's what I need to do. And I remember I was like a complete shock at 28 saying, wait a minute, donor eggs. And I left the office. I'm not a big crier, so I wasn't crying. I was like just more stunned. But I didn't take any time to grieve. I didn't take any time to figure out all those different symptoms I was talking about there. And so I went straight to the fertility clinic and went on a list for a donor egg. And this is back in the day where I was basically going on. So someone was going through male factor infertility, and she in turn would donate half of her eggs to us if we paid for her treatment of going through IVF. So did that, went on a list. This is like almost 18 years ago. So okay. When I told people donor eggs, they looked at me with like a blank stare. They didn't even know what a donor egg was. And now we have, because of all the IVF procedures going on, we have egg donation, we have egg adoption. Like I interviewed someone for my podcast and she adopted an embryo. Sorry, not egg adoption, embryo adoption and embryo donation. She adopted a little embryo and the natural siblings are 13 years old, and her little baby just turned 2. So that's pretty cool.
So
But again,
cool.
but we didn't have that back then. So, it's a newer thing. So when I said donor eggs, people didn't even know what I was saying. And so we went to this fertility clinic, were put on the list. And back then I received the donor profile in the mail. So, and I didn't even get a picture of the donor, but we had the maternal and the paternal histories back to the maternal and paternal grandparents. So we lined that up. I'm super tall, like 6 foot. So I wanted to have a somewhat tall donor, knowing I wouldn't get a 6 foot donor, but that tall, like height was the thing for me. And also, trying to somewhat match, my physical characteristics, but without seeing the person. Now with the donors, you can see what they look like, which I don't know, it's kind of even weirder because then you end up, there's like a whole thing where maybe you're going to pick someone. I don't know. Anyway, so I didn't have a picture. We just had the profile. And we're lucky enough on the first fresh transfer that it worked. And my daughter has just left the house and she is off to university. So she is almost 18.
So this was your husband's sperm.
My husband's sperm.
A donor egg. And then they just did, I am assuming that there was a period of time where you had to do the whole IVF procedure with the hormones.
Can you tell us? Didn't have to do any of the injections or anything. So okay. During this sort of time, I actually thought that I had it easier than other people that had to, use their own eggs, had to go through years and years of it not working, had to go through all those different, hormone shots and things. Now, I obviously had to do some preparation to get my body ready for it, like taking, and this was years ago, so I'm probably not going to remember exactly what I took, but like some hormones to prepare my body. But I did not do any injections. There wasn't any of that.
Okay.
And then obviously had to, monitor my hormone levels. So there was that piece running back and forth to the clinic. And then really also we had the other piece of the lady that was donating. So us taking half of her eggs, and she was dealing with male factor infertility. So she got, I think she had 18 eggs and donated half to us. And,
wow.
And they implanted 2, and then they had 2 embryos that were left over. And, both of them were like grade A, like top embryos. And it worked on the first transfer for Ava. And I was, 31. So
you were 31 years old. Mm-hmm. And you started this process about 28. So it was over a 3-year mm-hmm. fertility journey for you. Mm-hmm. And you said that you implanted 2 and then mm-hmm. 1 was successful, but you knew that twins was a possibility.
Yeah. And also, not that this would play in that, but my mom's a twin, but it's not my genetics. So
you could have had more than that if the egg split.
Exactly. People, we've got people with triplets and more. So I was, lucky enough on the first fresh transfer. And then after a year, I wanted my kids close together, had those 2 embryos there, and went back in. And my husband's like, Sarah, you seem a little stressed, and I was bound and determined to have the kids close together, and went back in, and that didn't work. So then we went on another list for a separate donor. And the same process, the mailbox and, the maternal and paternal grandparents, history, looked at the height thing again for me, and obviously the physical characteristics, and then also health and things like that. And then we were lucky on the first fresh transfer to have our son, and he's 15. So we're one of the fortunate ones that this actually worked.
So both of your children then are not 100% biological siblings. No. Okay. So let's go back really quick, just because I'm curious. I've got a question about, you said you went in a year later and you seemed a little stressed. Did they, at that point, did they implant both of those 2 remaining eggs at the same time? Mm-hmm. And then we're about to get into, more of your story. Do you feel that anything else played a role in that transfer being unsuccessful? Or do you feel that it was stress and stress hormones?
I do believe that I was keyed up, and, maybe my hormones hadn't quite balanced back from the year. I think a whole host of things going on, but I think the fact that the stress thing that I had to, I was bound and determined this was going to work. And I didn't really, and back then, I help people now with mind, body, and, we do diet, lifestyle, all these things. So I did none of that. I just went back in, did the transfer, and really didn't have, and even the counseling they provided back then, it was more, like it was very limited counseling. So there wasn't really anyone to talk to about this. I just, at the time, all my girlfriends were having babies. It was you get to be that age, 28 to usually past 28 when everyone got married. All my friends got married around the 25 mark, all started having babies kind of the 28, early 30s. So there was a baby epidemic in all my friend group. And I wanted to join the party.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't have my first until I was 35. So I remember many years of sadness, trying to be really excited when everyone was pregnant with their third baby. And I was like still not pregnant with my first. So, well, this is a really good place to pivot, Sarah, because what I really want to do is dig in and do as much teaching today as possible, because there is a lesson there, right? From the first transfer to the second transfer to the third transfer. And then we have additional lessons that we're going to dig into on your specialty and your passion that kind of grew out of this. But I want moms to kind of have heard from you maybe some of the things, if they're in the middle of this right now and they're going in for that IVF transfer, like what would be some key recommendations to help them reduce their stress and their anxiety and not be keyed up, to best prepare their body for, accepting a transfer? So I thought we could touch on that for just a minute and then turn into what it is that you do today to help conquer fertility.
Yeah. So so we take a functional approach. So we say that IVF is your last step. But if you are going to IVF in the next, month or two, and that's what you've decided to do, we will, like I say, to basically really dig into the mind body side of this and looking at visualization, looking at, meditation, talking about your emotions, like really dig into this, visualizing this working, because there can be a lot of stress, obviously, leading up to this and pressure, and sort of really kind of dig into self-care. And this is based on Alice Domar. So she's a Harvard researcher, and she's been running mind body fertility groups for over 20 years. And people in her group that did these mind body strategies, so visualization, fertility yoga, meditation, like being in a group and talking about their experience. So 55% of women got pregnant within 6 months, and then within 2 years, 95% went on to become a mother somehow. So this stuff is well proven. And if you're going to IVF, that's where you want to go. We take a functional approach, which looks at things completely differently. But if you're doing the IVF route, that's where I'd go.
Okay. So before we turn to functional medicine, if someone's already at that stage right now, like they've missed this podcast, they've, been directed, they're in the process of IVF, and to say they're listening and they're like, oh, I'm really terrible at mindfulness. Like this feels like something I just don't even know where to start. Does Alice's group still, is that something that listeners could be part of today?
Alice Domar still runs a group in Boston. Like we run groups a couple times a year. I've got one coming up in a couple weeks in September that I co-facilitate with a therapist, and she's run the mind body groups in a hospital setting for years. It's based on the principles of that. But really, if the mindfulness piece is too much, or the meditation, you think you've got to spend hours meditating. It's more like if the sitting still with meditating doesn't work, then try fertility yoga. If that doesn't work, when you're on a walk, just to be present, not, obviously we like people listening to podcasts, but when you're actually on a walk, take the earbuds out of your ear and listen to the birds, the sounds around you, your foot hitting the pavement. Or another part of mindfulness can be eating. We all eat. When you eat, instead of shoveling the food in, like I used to do, I'd sit there eating really quickly. It's more, chew each bite, sit at the table, have a nice plate, have a whole kind of a routine around this. So it feels very calming and not like eating at the counter and stuffing in your face. So those are kind of things for mindfulness. So it's either mindful eating, mindful walking, or even the shower. We all take a shower or a bath. And while in the shower, and this comes from John Kabat-Zinn. So he's the pioneer, the grandfather of mindfulness. And really, when you're in the shower, and he was on Oprah years ago, and he uses this analogy with her, saying when you're in the shower, feel the water on your body, smell their shampoo. Because a lot of times we're in the shower, we're planning our whole day, we're not even in the shower. So every time you come back to the water on your body, to smelling the shampoo, to feeling whatever it is, the heat of the shower, that's mindfulness, you coming back. So those simple things you can do as you start to prepare. And there's hypnotherapy and things like that too, but just that things, because there's a lot of pressure and worry and comparison and triggers everywhere for people that are dealing with infertility. And like I was saying, when usually in this age, a lot of people around you are getting pregnant. So a lot of triggers, jealousy, anger, resentment, all these emotions, to be able to give voice to them and not stuff them down.
Yeah, thank you. I think that those are all very practical pieces of advice. I interviewed just a short time ago a hypnotherapist. And so no matter where you're listening from, these are things that you can type into Google with your local city, type in things like there's an application that I use too called Headspace that I'm a big fan of, that helps someone who's not great at mindfulness. It starts with 1, 3, and 5 minute meditations. So just really getting into some practices that help with that deep relaxation and help eliminate some of that release of adrenaline and cortisol, and really help that body get out of that fight or flight response mode. So I will link to Alice's group and John's research into the show notes, as well as maybe a link for some apps that would help anyone who's currently in that IVF process. And now we're going to go back a little bit further. So if you're listening and you or someone you know or love has been struggling with fertility like Sarah was, and you're not at the end stage of this, right? You're just wondering about some of these menopausal hot flushes or irregular periods, or have been trying to get pregnant and have been unsuccessful for many months. Your skin is changing. You've noticed smelly discharge or yeast infections. You had mentioned random, I know, the eczema or the fungal things on your body. There are so many nausea, sleeplessness, restlessness. There are so many symptoms that we could talk about that kind of are symptoms of infertility. And so this is where Sarah's life work began. After this story that she told us and the success of having these beautiful children through a long journey and through that loss in between. And here you are today. So let's, Sarah, specifically talk to the women that are listening, that are right there in that space. They are, they're getting triggered. They're sad. They're trying. Every time their period comes, it's a moment of grief for them. Let's first define, what is a functional medicine practitioner?
Yeah, so functional medicine looks at the root cause of disease or illness so in conventional medicine, we'll name it. In this case, we're going to name an infertility diagnosis. And a lot of people get stuck on that infertility diagnosis and not looking at the whole body. So functional medicine, nutrition, the functional approach will look at the whole body and seek to ask why. And to dig deeper. So for me, I'll just kind of track a little bit back to my story, sort of how I figured all this out, because it was like years of me trying to figure this out. So after I had my daughter, I had 9 colds. Every cold went into a sinus infection. I thought it was a great idea to take antibiotics for every cold. Not a great idea. I destroyed all my gut flora. And then after that, I started getting vertigo. I got chronic bladder infections. I was peeing blood. And then became allergic to all the antibiotics because I just kept taking antibiotics for the bladder infections, the sinus infections, and then the yeast infections became chronic. The acne got worse. I had dandruff, toenail infections. And although at the time I was still functioning, and I was in corporate still, but my immune system was pathetic. There was I got everything that passed by me. And then I took a life coaching course. And that's when I discovered that I loved health and wellness. And then I took this health coaching course. And that's when I discovered that I had these food sensitivities. So for me, when I took out dairy and gluten and later corn, the sinus infections, the bladder infections, the yeast infections slowly started going away. And then it was taking out the dairy and gluten, and then also digging into targeted supplements. And then a few years after that, taking a stool test and figuring out I had gut infections. So it was this long, and I didn't discover any of this till I was 40. So I was fully in menopause. I was no longer cycling. So if you're still cycling naturally, there's things we can do. And I think a lot of times people come to me and, they'll say they're eating a clean diet. And, but as we dig into it, I say most people will say they don't have food sensitivity. I'd say 100% of people that we work with, there's some sort of food sensitivity going on. And not to say that's, if you have that right now, that you'll always have it, because it's a reflection of the current state of affairs with your gut health. And as we start to look at potential gut infections and heal that, then we can allow the body to heal. But really, with functional medicine, it's looking at those stressors, be it a food sensitivity, be it a gut infection, looking at environmental toxins. We're all exposed to those, to the personal care, your cleaning chemicals, your plastics, the water that's not filtered. So those kind of environmental toxins, the mental emotional stressor. I think a lot of times with fertility, we focus a lot on the mental emotional stressor and forget the other environment, gut infections, food sensitivities, then also structural stress if there's a pinched nerve. So those sort of things, and digging deeper. And we use functional testing to really test, don't guess. Because right now, if you go and Google fertility foods or fertility superfoods, you're going to be inundated with a whole bunch of foods. And then even with the supplement side of things, people get stuck taking all these supplements, not knowing why they're taking it. So ours, we use testing to then take a targeted approach to it.
And when you say testing, you mean some blood or stool tests, saliva tests, like what kinds specifically, what types of testing?
Yeah, so we start off by using the LEAP MRT test. And that's a food sensitivity test that looks at 200 foods and food chemicals. So foods in the yellow, you keep up for 60 days. Foods in the red, you'd keep up for 90 days. And then while we're waiting for the results of the food sensitivity test, we have you do an elimination diet. An elimination diet, we have you do that with your partner. So in the beginning, I was just coaching women, and now we coach couples to really, because it takes two to tango, even though most people that come to us it's female factor infertility. There's always things that we can do to optimize preconception health for the male partner as well. So we do the elimination diet. So taking out the top allergens, which are dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, and eggs. You take those out for 10 days and then systematically reintroduce them. So really the gold standard to figure out a food sensitivity is the elimination diet. And then so you reintroduce them. We've had people that bring back in corn. It could flare up their asthma. Bring back in dairy. You can feel phlegmy. Bring back in gluten, digestive issues. So it's different for everyone. So not until you actually see how it feels, because you could do a food sensitivity test. It could come back that you're, sensitive to all your favorite foods, which then could just indicate that you have a leaky gut and you need to, work on your gut health. But it can be overwhelming. And I've had that where you take the food sensitivity test, you're like, what the heck? What am I going to eat? Are you kidding me?
Let me pause you right there, because so many people mention this leaky gut, and yet so many people have no idea what that is or what that means. So could you just kind of dig in a little bit on leaky gut?
Yeah, so leaky gut or intestinal permeability, basically the body is mounting an immune response to food. So it's like got these little cheesecloth, and as the proteins and things coming through, your body then becomes on high alert, and things that were normally fine for you, it's almost this tipping point too, where you're like, wait a minute, I've had gluten my whole life, or I've had corn or almonds, whatever it is, and all of a sudden the body is like, ooh, I can't take it anymore. So it's that tipping point. And really with the leaky gut, and the leaky gut can be caused by, so we see a lot of people that have been on long-term hormonal birth control. Same for me. So that will then impact your nutrient levels, as well as it impacts the health of your gut. So predisposing you to these food sensitivities and gut infections. So, and then antibiotics, then that can impact a leaky gut, chronic stress, And a lot of times, and if I look back for myself, and I'd be like, oh, I wasn't stressed. I didn't think I was stressed. But look, like going through infertility, it is stressful. And even though I, at the time could handle stress, it just got to the point where I couldn't anymore. And now when I find myself saying yes to too many things, it's like, wait a minute, you got to dial it back and really focus on self-care. So a lot of those things can be underlying causes for a leaky gut, then predisposing you again to these food sensitivities. So it is to dig into that. And so we do the food sensitivity test. We also do a Dutch test that looks at your hormones using urine, so looking at your sex hormones and looking at your cortisol and your melatonin, and really seeing which pathways the hormones are going down. So as part of my team, I work with a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She's the one running the tests and then developing the protocol based on the testing. So it's a test, don't guess model. So it's a food sensitivity testing. Then we do the Dutch test. And we've had people that come in with, low ovarian reserve or premature ovarian failure, and actually their estrogen is fine. And other times we have it that's flat. So it's different for everyone. Sometimes people will be taking different supplements for what they think that there's like a hormonal imbalance with what they think it is. And then with the Dutch test, we actually know what it is. So that's a crucial test. And then the third test we do is the stool test, and we use the GI map test. It looks at the DNA of your stool. I'd say the majority of people that we work with, there's something going on in the gut, be it a parasite, a bacterial infection, a fungal infection. There's some sort of gut infection. And then as we use targeted supplements to address that, then you can start to heal. And then you potentially, these foods that you were sensitive to, you can start bringing them back in as you start to heal the gut. And then the last one we do is the hair tissue mineral analysis. And that looks at your mineral status, because a lot of times you're eating this healthy diet, but maybe you're not absorbing it. And so you can tweak a lot of that with diet and with some targeted supplements. So those are the 4 tests we use. And then we develop a protocol. And really the tests are the beginning. People get stuck kind of on the test part of it. But that's really the beginning, because you've got to then make all these lifestyle changes. So with making diet changes, and it's more than just, because you can eat this beautiful targeted diet. It is more than just diet. It is looking at lifestyle, looking at your sleep. So sleep hygiene is the foundation of good health and fertility. So you work on sleep hygiene with clients for months. Movement that's right for you. The environmental toxin load. So getting rid of that. And it's not about going to your house or your personal care and throwing it all out. It's when they expire, then you can get a better option. And for that, it's to go to the Skin Deep database, and you can look at your current product, and you want it between a 1 and a 3. So just check what your current products are, and then as they expire, just get a new one. So it's not panicking here. Yes. Sometimes people will go into that. The panic mode on, like, oh, I got to throw it all out. I got to change everything over. And that in itself causes stress. So this is we have a 6-month program. It's with your partner. It's a slow approach, but it's slow, but you can get results quite quickly by making these targeted changes and not panicking about the whole thing.
I know. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the skincare, because the skin is our largest organ. And I think people sometimes forget, when you put lotions on or perfume or deodorant or your makeup or, shaving gel or shampoo or conditioner, like all of these things play a role also, not just the food that we're putting inside of our body. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Hey, it's Heidi. I'm interrupting the podcast to let you know about a free resource that I've created for you at birthstory.com. All you have to do is go to birthstory.com and then click the tab that says The Workbook. Once you put your email address in, an entire resource library of all of my secret sauces are available to you for free as my thank you for listening to the Birth Story podcast and being part of this community. At birthstory.com, under the workbook, you will find a birth plan template, articles on circumcision, delayed cord clamping, flipping a breech baby, packing your hospital bag, acupressure points, placenta encapsulation, and so much more. There are over 20 free articles ready for you to download at birthstory.com. Now let's get back to this amazing episode. One of the things I wanted to ask you is because there is, women that are listening to this podcast are going to be of all different ages. Some of them might not have gone down the IUI or the IVF or this other route yet, which in this interview, we are considering a last resort. But there's also the age of the mom is sometimes playing a role in how much like they're getting nervous because they feel like they're having on a fertility journey, but they're also running out of time. So what I wanted to talk to you about is if someone is listening today and they're in rural Montana and there is not a functional medicine practitioner and they're interested in what you're saying, can some of these things be done? Can functional medicine practitioners like yourself work with clients remotely is my first question. And then the second, what is the typical time frame from the time someone comes to you with infertility, you do all of the testing, you do the implementation, and then you say, now you should try to get pregnant again?
Yeah, so we work with our couples. We work with couples worldwide. It's all via Zoom, so via video chat, and
Okay.
also all the tests are shipped internationally and through North America. So we're lucky. We're in 2019. This is super accessible to people, and really functional medicine, functional nutrition. The functional approach is the future of conventional medicine. Instead of just, as we say, just naming it and throwing a pill at it. This is to look to see why. Because
Perfect.
if your body and infertility, there's 1 in 6 in Canada, 1 in 8 in the US, and 1 in 5 in the UK. So, and even stats before, it was 60% female infertility, 50%, that's 40% male, and now it's showing more 50-50. So this is, if you've seen the show The Handmaid's Tale, I watched that show and I'm like, oh my God, because they're talking all about the food and the water and all these contaminants, and that may not be too far off. But anyways,
I was like, maybe I should give it another try. I didn't even make it through the first episode. It's so weird. And I was like, this is too far. This is too far for me.
I'm on the second season, but I'm like, damn, this is a bummer, this show. But anyways, it's well done. So with that, we work remotely for sure.
Yeah. What I wanted to interject right there is that so many women take on the responsibility of thinking that their infertility is because of them. And I'm so glad that you just threw those statistics out, because your partner, if you're in a heterosexual relationship looking to get pregnant this way,
right,
then your male partner, their diet, their nutrition, their stress, their food sensitivities, their products that they're using in the shower and on their skin and on their face that they are ingesting, that is 50% of the puzzle. That your male partner, if that is your relationship, is just as important to be on this journey. It is not just on us, the women who are carrying the baby. Creating a healthy embryo is 50-50. And so I'm so glad that you touched on that this is a journey for both partners to be on. And even, I'm assuming, even for the couples that you're working with that may be going the IUI or IVF or embryo adoption route because they are not in a heterosexual cisgender relationship,
sure.
But the carrying mother still has to prepare her body. And when the carrying mother has to prepare her body, you still need your partner on that journey with you.
Yeah, because it's mostly women that come to me. I'd say about 99% of women are the ones that reach out to me first, and they're the ones making all these changes. And the partner typically is quite supportive, and they may not even know what to do. And they may try to do some supplements and try to do some things, but they're not quite sure what they can do to optimize it. And also men and women handle infertility differently. Women typically are the ones that join the forums, join the Facebook groups, reach out, have an account on Instagram, and really reach out that way. Maybe tell a few close friends. Men, generalizing stereotypically, will tell no one, but it doesn't mean they're not equally hurting. So that's a point as well. And I think you mentioned before about the age thing, and we have women and couples. It doesn't matter what age they are, like 28, 38, 44, wherever they are, they're past the point where they want to expand their family. So I'd say everyone's in a panic, which can be scary, because even like people at 30 are in a panic. So it doesn't matter the age. It's really like how they are. And then they're feeling that their only choice is to go to the fertility clinic, when that is the last step. Like, why do you want, if it takes, if an average IVF has a 30% success rate, and it takes an average of 3 cycles at a cost of $60,000, why is that the first step? Why, let's look to see, well, why do you have irregular periods? Why do you have unexplained infertility with the functional approach is not unexplained. We've had people coming in with unexplained infertility. They actually have an undiagnosed autoimmune disease, multiple gut infections, food sensitivities, high stress. There's reasons. It's not unexplained. So that is just, this is, glazing over the issues. So,
and I think that's what was so important about what you do as a functional medicine practitioner. As you started this podcast, you said, I am looking for the root cause. There is always a root cause, whether we find it or not. And one of the easiest examples that I give to my clients when I'm talking to them, and again, I'm just a doula, I'm not a functional medicine practitioner, but when I'm working with my clients, especially if they've had 1 or 2 babies and then all of a sudden they're having trouble getting pregnant with the third, right? Because maybe hormones, sensitivities, things have changed, stress levels have changed, over time. But I say, if you go to the doctor and you have heartburn and they give you a heartburn pill, that day it's going to take away your heartburn. But that's just a Band-Aid. We're just covering up a symptom. But why are you having heartburn? What did you eat, right? Is your lower esophageal sphincter loose? Do you have celiacs? There's always an underlying cause. And this is the same with fertility. And here in North Carolina, they tell you to try for 1 year, this floors me. I believe that if you are healthy and you are trying to get pregnant, you are not pregnant within 6 months, then I believe you should be seeking a functional medicine practitioner to be making big lifestyle changes by understanding your gut bacteria, your gut flora, your food sensitivities, your lifestyle. Like, this is where I believe Sarah Clark comes in. And Sarah, I could not be more excited that you said that you can work across the world with anyone on Zoom, because so many of my listeners are listening in from rural parts of many different countries. And so I wanted to be able to put this podcast out here with some functional advice about functional medicine, but that if someone's listening, that they feel like they could also take action no matter where they live. So how, Sarah, would people get a hold of you if they are listening to this podcast? They're in the middle of this fertility journey. They're not ready for that last resort of IVF. And they're really interested in doing this testing with you.
Yeah, sure. So they can find me on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. So we interview functional doctors as well as people in the natural fertility space and the mind body space. So really looking at this completely differently. And I sort of I'll even take apart, like, if you have acne, what should you do? If you have a mental health issue such as depression or anxiety, how are these all linked to your infertility? And they all are. So we'll kind of tease apart different symptoms, even though in the functional approach we don't focus on that. But I think it's for people to kind of say, wait a minute. Because sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, oh, I have infertility plus, oh, by the way, I have an autoimmune disease. Oh, by the way, I get migraines. Oh, by the way, and it's not by the way. It's like, oh, that is a huge clue. Oh, by the way, I've been on, 10 years of birth control. Those are huge clues.
So someone can push pause right now on my podcast, go into your podcast app and search for Get Pregnant Naturally and hit subscribe.
That's right.
And then unpush pause and come back to listen to the rest of this podcast.
There you go.
And then, so how else? I know you wrote a book. Will you tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. So it's Fabulously Fertile. It's on Amazon and basically just goes through the the foundational steps, be it diet and lifestyle steps. It also has a meal plan and recipes in there to really take the first steps of what you need to do as far as looking at diet, looking at lifestyle, looking at sleep. All of that is detailed in the book. But yeah, that's and I also have a cookbook too. But really, to me, the best place is to go to the podcast, and you'll see it all laid out there. When we talked about the elimination diet, I tell you how to go through the elimination diet in the podcast. So yeah.
And then I see that you're active on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Will you share with listeners how they may follow you?
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, it's FabFertile, FAB Fertile is the handle. And then on Facebook, it's SESA Coaching, SESA Coaching. And Twitter is FabFertile, FAB Fertile. That's my site, FabFertile.
FabFertile. And then do you have a website also?
Yeah, FabFertile.
It is the FabFertile. So fabfertile.com. And all of this, Sarah, I will link to in the show notes so that everyone that's listening, that's interested in learning more about your services, that they know exactly how to get a hold of you. But I really do hope that everyone will start with the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast and kind of add that into your podcast lineup. So Sarah, thank you so much for being on today. I just know that there are going to be women that are listening, and today we have kind of maybe had an opportunity to slow down their journey, give them a voice to go look towards a functional medicine approach. Maybe they'd never heard of any of this before, and they can just kind of push pause, take a look at what's going on in their body, make notice if there's any of those other symptoms that we were talking about that could be red flags that are contributing to the infertility. And so that they may consider something like IVF as a last resort rather than the first stop. And then again, this is a lifestyle change too. So as you mentioned, I'm over 40, you're over 40. Even once the childbearing years have kind of come and gone, that knowing this information about what your food sensitivities are and the way that your body and your gut responds, the way your skin responds to different things, including stress, this functional medicine is not just for fertility, is what I'm trying to say. Is this is something that then you can adopt into your children's lifestyles. And we have the opportunity to raise the next generation that comes behind us to know things about mindfulness and healthy eating and relaxation. I've talked about this many times on my podcast. My children and I are on the Reed diet. It was a provider here in the United States, Katie Reed. But essentially, my son had a stroke when I was birthing him and has cerebral palsy and hydrocephalus. And we see a huge changes in his ability to verbally communicate at 4 years old, and to, have easier transitions when the inflammation is out of his body, so that the neuro pathways between his gut and his brain can communicate well, even with brain damage. And the differences have been completely night and day by cutting out dairy, gluten, soy, corn, all of these things that stem back to glutamate. So I'm a raving fan of yours, Sarah Clark, and functional medicine practitioners in general. And I just couldn't be more thankful for this podcast today.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Heidi, and doing the work that you do as well. And looking at the functional approach, you can't go back. That's why I'm sharing it with everyone, because once you find it, it's like, what? Why didn't I know this?
Yes.
And I consider myself a educated, somewhat smart woman. And I'm like, why did I not know this? And so I think it's up to us to spread the word.
Yeah, spread the word. Please share about this episode. Please share about the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And you never know, at the end of this, you may have a little baby in your arms or a toddler like me, that in the mornings you're turning on your Vitamix and you're putting things like fennel, kale, spinach, carrot greens, and beet greens. All of those things went into my child's smoothie this morning, and
beautiful.
it was finished within 30 seconds. So it is possible. It is possible. So I hope we make a bunch of believers and change makers out of this podcast today. Thank you, Sarah. And we will talk to you again soon. Let's have you on again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want.